So, if you're having challenges walking your dog because they're pulling on the walk, what I want to talk about today is how I actually got my dog to stop pulling when it comes down to walking. And, when I was thinking about this topic and thinking about my own dog and, when he was pulling and things like that, I wasn't a trainer, believe it or not. So, it was a little bit different. So, when I'm going through these, even when I'm training, I usually try to put it into perspective and thinking about it before I was a trainer because I understand how you feel. So as I go through how I stop my dog from pulling, I'm going to talk to you as a trainer, not as Pam before I was a trainer, just to throw that out there. So let's talk about your dog's pulling. When we think about dogs pulling, dogs don't pull for no reason at all. When you think about dogs pulling, you want to get behind the reason why they are pulling in order to help them not to pull. Dogs will pull for many different reasons. Dogs may pull because they're excited to see another dog or person or to get to something. They may pull because of the different smells in the world, and so they're pulling to get to that. They may pull because they're fearful, not pulling in a good way, but pulling to get away from something, okay? So there's a few reasons why your dog may pull. As I'm going through these different steps, I want you to think about your dog and what the reason it is behind it, because it's going to be a different approach as to how you want to go about training. And so my dog at the time was a puppy. And so I know for a fact when it comes down to puppies, puppies are very curious. They want to explore. They're new to the world. They don't even know how to walk on leash, really. And so when we talk about dogs pulling or puppies pulling or dogs in general, if they're curious to see things, they're going to pull. Right. And so usually what I like to do and what I did with my dog when he was younger, if you think about it, leashes are 6 feet long. They're different 6 feet leashes, 15-foot leashes, and things like that. If you're using a 6-foot leash on the walk and your dog's pulling, ideally it just makes your dog pull more because they don't have that lymph to explore and things like that. So you think your dog's pulling, but your dog's just really pulling because they want to explore and a leash is too short. But what you can do if your dog is an explorer, you can use a longer leash, okay? So using like a 15-foot leash, especially, if you're walking around the neighborhood, I do it in my neighborhood, depending on your neighborhood, if you can get away with it, I just use a longer leash, like a 15-foot leash, and I just let my puppy explore, and that help this pulling subside because now your dog has enough leash to explore and you don't have to worry about pulling. Again, you can't honestly use a long line anywhere. I used to not be a fan of retractable leashes, but what I will say, I am a fan of them if you do have a dog that pulls, but they want to explore. I have seen retractable leashes work great in that way. If your dog is pulling and not pulling to the point where, they're knocking you over and things like that, but you know that they definitely want to explore. I love a retractable leash because then it could just kind of yo-yo and they can explore and things like that. But also just using a longer leash will do well as, for your dog's pulling. So that's what I essentially did with my dog, was use a longer leash. But of course, you still want to teach them not to pull at all. So if your dog is curious, or say they're not curious, but they're just pulling in general because they don't know how to walk on leash, one thing I did too was I practiced just simple recalls on the walk with my dog, just so that he's coming back to me on the walk. And when they're back close to you, they can't really pull. And if you use the treats on a walk and you just practice recalls, and what I mean is like your dog's walking in front of you or whatever it may be, you just simply call your dog's name. My dog's name is Pal. So I'll just say Pal. And then when he comes back to me, I'll give him a treat. And what ends up happening is we call it checking in, where your dog will look to you more often. And if they're coming back to you that often because they think they're going to get a treat or just for you to say good dog, that's them pulling less as well. So a combination between, having the treats on you, doing some simple recalls so they can check in more often with you to a point where you won't even have to call them back. They just come closer. That will help with the pulling as well. One other situation where I seen dogs pull wasn't my dog, but I just want to throw it out there as an extra tip. If you have someone in a household that actually is a runner or walks briskly and you walk rather slower, or if you're the one that's a runner, what ends up happening is your dog doesn't know when what's the right pace or speed, so they end up pulling. So what you want to do is you can teach the dog like, hey, when you're with this person, you're going to walk at this pace. When you're with me, you're going to walk at that pace. But you have to again work with the dog on not pulling, and I go right back to using the treats that I use with my dog on the recalls as well. Another thing I did with my dog too to help with the pulling on the walks is sometimes when a dog go on walks, they're really, really excited. And so I would just simply go out in the backyard, get some treats, toss it, get some of that energy out before I walked him on walks, just so that when I go outside, it's not like, boom, you bust in through the door, like, let's go, let's go, let's go, like they usually are. If you calm them down before the walks, that will help decrease the pulling. And so that's ideally what I did with my pup earlier on. If you another thing, if your dog is curious, like I talked about, like my dog was curious going out at a different time of day. If your dog is a people greeter or want to greet people, times of day where people are less likely to be out. I know I did that for a while with my dog, just so we can focus on the recalls and him staying near, and it's not those other distractions about. So that's essentially just the basic tips. It's just about consistency too. If you're thinking like, oh my gosh, so you just did those three things, it's going to be about the consistency doing those three things. So again, with my dogs, you could do the same thing when it comes to walking your dog and pulling. First things first, you're getting your dog geared up to go for a walk. If you have a backyard, go scatter some treats, play some fetch, do something to get some of that extra energy out, so the walk is not the outlet for them, which they're going to be pulling. Also, the type of leash you're using. If you have a dog that's an explorer, using a longer leash, or going to like a park area where they can't explore on a long line, or using a retractable leash if your dog is an explorer and not so much a puller, and you kind of think they just want to explore more so than pulling. And again, if you do put your dog on a retractable leash and they're pulling to the end, then I would just go back to the long line, because those things can break. Next is also, let me throw this in there, using a harness too. A front clip harness that clips in the chest area will help redirect your dog from pulling, opposed to the ones in the back. That actually makes your dog pull more. So just make sure if you do have a harness, you're using the one that clips in the front. Last tip, as always, going out at a time of day where there's people or other dogs less likely to be out, so your dog's not pulling as much. So you can focus on a loose leash walk and training, using the treats to keep them there, and also the recalls as well. That's essentially how I trained my dog to stop pulling on leash. Right now, he is 7 years old. He is no longer a puppy. He is very, very good on leash. I take him out at the same time each day in the evening. Just consistency in the training, like I said, is always going to work out to help your dog reduce pulling. But if you have questions about your dog pulling, you can always reach out, drop them in the comments. If you want to listen to this, you can listen as well on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Stitcher, any Apple podcast platforms. So feel free to listen to me there. Other than that, I hope you enjoy your week, and I'll see you next week with another great topic. Bye.